Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. Tonight's discussion is regarding the final stage when dealing with the cluster B creature, which is the discard. Now this video will be a little different from the last two that were covering other stages, because I'm incorporating something else into this one, which you may have heard that if you're discarded by the creature, let's take a look at what that is first. You may have known that this person was doing things that were unethical. However, the way they play their game, it's easy to disguise because they tend to overcompensate in other areas, and then when they come up short elsewhere, you're ready to say, oh, it's over, and they'll be quick to say, but wait a second, what about this? And you'll be thinking too, well, it is really nice when we do those certain things at certain times. I like that. Eventually it gets to the point where the creature can no longer keep it up, and they may replace you, and you'll just wonder, wow, how did you meet someone so fast and fall in love so quick? Well, because they were auditioning it behind your back. But regardless of all the hurt feelings, there will be plenty, because you'll be able to, on one hand, argue your point of, I knew this person was up to no good, I knew this meant this, and I put this and that together, and even confronted it, and it said I was wrong. I wasn't. And that's a good feeling. However, at the discard, you may find yourself going through a tough experience. Yes, even if you can rationally say that that person didn't deserve me because it did these things, those are deal breakers, but you still have invested all that time with them. And you'll be tempted to want to cling on to any straw you can grasp onto to try to save the day. Problem is, with this type of creature, there is no saving of the day. Eventually, it sets in when you've been discarded by this creature, and there's no more hourly, every minute texting. There's no longer phone calls every few minutes. There's no longer emails. There's no longer anything, and that can be devastating, even if you didn't care about it that much in the beginning, because you've adopted this into your life. You've come to rely on it. You're used to it, and then all of a sudden it stops. What I'm going to do is incorporate something from a different website called grief.com. It's an article called The 5 Stages of Grief, and it's written by David Kessler, or is it Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? When you've been discarded, there's a void there. You've probably heard it said elsewhere that it's very similar to the grieving period of when you've lost a loved one. This is therapeutic for me because I just recently had to say goodbye to 2 darling doggies I raised from babies. They were the size of rats, all the way to 17 and a half years, brother, sister, and I'm still experiencing the grief for that. But it ties into the narcissistic creature discard. It's a very similar circumstance you're going through, which you'll understand as I cover each of the 5 stages from this article. The first stage of your grief, which is losing your cluster B creature that you saw the flaws in, but you also saw the beauty in. You thought you could reconcile it all together, but it didn't work out that way, and now you're left without it. Well, number 1 stage is denial. On first thought, I would think that means you're just denying it happened. No, that's not what it means. Denial is the first of the 5 stages of grief. It helps us to survive the loss. This is the stage when the world becomes meaningless and overwhelming, and your life just doesn't make any sense anymore. There's a state of shock and denial. We go numb. We wonder how we could possibly go on, if we can go on. Why should we go on? We try to find a way to just get through the day every day. Denial and shock help us to cope with our feelings of grief. There is a grace in denial. It is nature's way of letting in only as much as we can tolerate. As you accept the reality of the loss and start to ask yourself questions, you are unknowingly beginning your healing process. You're becoming stronger, and the denial is beginning to fade. But as you proceed, all the feelings that you were once denying are all going to come up to the surface. The second stage of grief is anger. Anger is a necessary stage of the healing process. You've got to be willing to feel the anger that you have. even though it may seem endless. The more you actually feel it, the more it will begin to dissipate, and the more you will be able to heal. There are many other emotions under the anger, and you will get to them in due time. But anger is the emotion we are most used to managing in our regular lives. The truth is that anger has no limits. It can extend not only to your friends, the doctor, family, or yourself and your loved one who's died, but also to God. You may ask, where is God in this situation? Underneath this anger is pain. It's your pain, and that is a natural thing to feel deserted and abandoned. But we live in a society that fears anger. Anger can be strength, and it can be an anchor. It can give you temporary structure to the nothingness of loss. At first, grief feels like you're being lost in the sea. No connection to anything or anybody. Then you get angry at somebody. Maybe someone who didn't attend the funeral, for example. Maybe somebody who's just not around. Or maybe someone who's different now that your loved one's passed. Suddenly you have a structure. Your anger towards this person. The anger becomes a bridge over the open sea. A connection from you to them. It's something to hold on to, and a connection made from the strength of anger feels better than nothing. We usually know more about suppressing anger than feeling it. The anger is just another indication of the intensity of your love. The third stage is bargaining. Before the loss occurs, which could apply to when you can feel the cluster B creature starting to separate, and maybe you're still positive thinking that you can work through these few issues and make it work, yet now this person's obviously decided to move on without consulting you first. If you sense this happening, you may pray to your Lord and Savior, whoever that may be. Please God, you may bargain, I'll never be angry at him or her again. If you'll just let her stay or let her live. After the loss, bargaining may take the form of a temporary truce. You may say, what if I devote the rest of my life to helping others? Then can I wake up and have all this just be a bad dream? We become lost in a maze of, if only I had done this, or what if I had done that statements. We want life returned to what it was. We want our loved one restored with us. We want to go back into time, find that tumor sooner, recognize whatever illness it might have been quickly, which in this case doesn't necessarily apply. But we want to stop whatever happened from happening. If only we did this, if only we did that. Well, guilt is often bargaining's companion. The if-onlys cause us to find the fault in ourselves and what we think we should or could have done differently. We may even bargain with that pain. We'll do anything not to feel the pain of this loss. We may stay in the past trying to negotiate our way out of the hurt. People many times think that the stages of grief last weeks or months. They forget that the stages are responses to feelings that can last for minutes or hours as we flip in and out of one, then another. It states we do not enter and leave each individual stage of grief in a linear fashion. We may feel one, then another, then back again to the first one. The next stage of grief would be depression. After we've bargained our way, like I recall bargaining, praying that the girl will be saved, and it didn't happen. Well, I was bargaining. But our attention moves squarely into the present. Empty feelings present themselves, and grief enters our lives on a much deeper level, deeper than we could ever have imagined. This depressive stage feels as though it's going to go on forever. It's important to understand that this depression is not a sign of being mentally ill. It's the appropriate response to a horrible loss. We will withdraw from life. We'll be left in a fog of intense sadness, wondering perhaps if there's any point in going on alone. Why should we go on at all? Depression after a loss is too often seen as an unnatural thing, a state that needs to be fixed, something to snap out of. The first question we should ask ourselves is whether or not the situation we're in is truly depressing. The loss of a loved one is a very depressing situation, including being discarded by a creature. To not experience depression after a loved one's gone would be unusual. When the loss finally settles in your soul, the realization that your loved one didn't get better better this time and is not coming back is very depressing. If grief is a process of healing, then depression is one of the many necessary steps you have to take along the way. The final stage of grief is acceptance. Acceptance is many times confused with the notion of being alright with everything, or being okay with it all, with the fact that your creature left you or that you lost a loved one. This is not the case, says the author. Many people don't ever feel okay or ever feel alright about the loss of a loved one. This stage is about accepting the reality that our loved one is physically gone and recognizing the fact that this new reality is the new permanent reality. We will never like this reality or make it okay, but eventually we will just accept it. We learn to live with it. It's the new norm with which we must learn to live in. We must try to live now in a world where our loved one is simply missing. In resisting this new norm at first, many of us will want to maintain life as it was before this loved one was gone. In time, though, through bits and pieces of acceptance, however, we'll eventually see that we cannot maintain that past and keep it intact. It's been forever changed, and we've got to readjust. We must learn to reorganize roles, reassign them to others, or take them on ourselves. Finding acceptance may be just having more good days than bad days. As we begin to live again and enjoy our lives, we often will feel that in doing so we're betraying the loved one. We can never replace what's been lost, but we can make new connections, new meaningful relationships, and new interdependencies. Instead of denying our feelings, we listen to our needs, we move, change, grow, and evolve. We may start to reach out to others and become involved in their lives. We invest in our friendships and in our relationship with ourselves. We begin to live again, but we cannot do so until we've given grief its time. So again, these all apply to the fact that you've lost this creature, and I could throw in also the fact that this creature was never even real, which doesn't really take away the feelings you had when you were involved with them, but it kind of helps you just to know it. And there's a slight difference as far as when you've lost a living being and it's gone. That's a slight bit different from when the creature has discarded you. Because although all the other feelings are very close to what it feels like when you've lost a person's life, it can kind of make things worse in some cases, because when you've lost a loved one and they're gone, period, well, there's no way to ever reach back to them or say anything to them. But when you're with this creature and it's discarded you, the tough part is this person's still alive. They're still around. Never mind they've taken on a brand new character and they're playing a different role. It's tempting to want to reach out to them and say something because they're still around. If you've been discarded and you're involved with this kind of creature, it should be taken as a blessing, even though that's difficult to hear, it's difficult to accept if you're intertwined with such a creature. But take it from the expert in the narcissistic cluster B, which you are much better off without them because they do not change.
I am the narcopath. I've got a message for you, the people of the United States.
We've got to ban the guns. We've got to get rid of semi-automatic rifles like the AR-15. Guns are bad. They kill people. We need to control them. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of people who've been shot by unloaded guns. That's pretty serious, don't you think? Please join me. Walk out of your school, chant, raise your fist up like Hitler, and demand change. How'd I do? I think I've got the job.
When you're the narcopath like I am, you learn ways to get around things.
Speaking of gun violence, if you're the narcopath, your life is at constant risk. Being diagnosed and convicted as a narcopath, and long ago, I'm not allowed to purchase firearms. Oof, because of the laws. Well, honey, with my lifestyle, that ain't gonna work. You know what I do? I show my teeth to the right person and wink and say, honey, I'd really like one of them firearms they've got there at that gun show. Would you please purchase me one of these? And I give a piece of paper with a few different models. And 5 minutes later, I've got what I wanted. Maybe not 5 minutes, but a little bit later, I got it. And I've done this at least 20 times, so I am armed to the hilt. You can't take any chances. Jilted ex-lovers of mine come looking for revenge. I need my protection. You think I'm going to follow any new gun laws? I don't think so. You all go ahead and pass those so you all can restrict yourselves while I move in, take over, and take you out.
You know, I'd love to sit here and talk guns all day, but that's not my function. As a result of one of TJ's recent videos, I'm here to talk to you about the smear campaign. You probably have questions about the smear campaign I put you through.
Of course, I discarded you. I no longer had any uses for you, mainly because you figured me out. I know you were probably perplexed when you went to all of our so-called mutual friends. To you, it was just so unexpected that I would just up and leave you, and the next day, you saw me in love with somebody else. All traces of you erased from our social media. That's the way I work. And you tried to go to some of our mutual friends and cry to them, and I heard from a few of them. How could she just leave me like that after all we've been through? The truth is, your smear campaign began long before the discard. Once I'd spotted my latest target, I knew I had to get rid of you. So I started planting little seeds in their minds. I would tell them things like about arguments we had when you found out I was cheating with the next door neighbor. I would tell them that you accused me of cheating with the next door neighbor that I had never even seen. And they believed it. But I told them, oh, but please, don't tell him I told you this because he gets violent. He might beat me, and I even smacked my face a few times to get rid of a bruise. And I told them you did, and they believed it. Because I'm nice. By the time it all ended, they had their head fortified with all kinds of horror stories I told them, always with the caveat, don't tell them I told you. And they were faithful to me, stupid fool. When you finally came to them crying about how I left you, I bet you were surprised to find most of them say, oh, I knew for quite a while there were problems between you two. Keep in mind, this was the time I was leading you on that everything was just fine. To them, it was going downhill. I had to think ahead. My new target was waiting, so I was sure to repeat those stories to him. So if he ever sees you in public, he'll knock you out because of how you hurt precious me. Maybe next time you'll think twice before you choose to spy on someone. You deserve whatever comes to you.